Many people hope that someday we'll meet an intelligent being from another world. Hollywood tells us this stranger will come flying down in a spaceship, and he'll look a bit like us. Most importantly, he'll have a mind like ours, and we'll figure out how to communicate right away. But maybe it won't be like that. Maybe it'll be like this.
And that is a familiar voice, Ryan Reynolds, of course, a Vancouver-born boy, narrating a familiar story about Luna the orca. The movie is called The Whale, and of course it is very familiar to everybody on the West Coast. Here is co-director to talk about it a little bit more, Michael Parfit. How are you, Michael?
Hi, it's great to be here.
Now, this story has had many incarnations. Maybe you can tell us about The Whale, Luna, and what the film is now.
Well, the film started out, we were going to do a film of a 1-hour film. It grew to a 2-hour film. It turned into a film called Saving Luna, which I narrated, and went to film festivals all over the world and won a lot of awards. And then Ryan Reynolds got involved, Ryan and Scarlett Johansson, and we really took it to another level. We worked on it with them, and made it shorter, but added things. So it really was quite a different, film.
And for people that are like me, I remember snippets of the story. You know, I remember little bits and little pieces, but to see it all put together is just, I mean, it's mind-blowing. But refresh people a little bit on the story of Luna and Nootka Sound and how Luna.
You know, it's a lot of ways I keep thinking of it. It's a bit like the story of E.T. You know, this stranger shows up, and what happened is this little whale got lost, separated from his pod, and shows up in the place of Nootka Sound on the west coast of Vancouver Island. Well, they're really social animals, and he was looking for some sort of social connection because they needed so much.
Looking/demanding.
Demanding, exactly. And he found it with people. And so he would be coming up to people and sticking his head in their boats, basically.
Yeah.
And at times he would be, you know, opening his mouth and people would scratch his tongue. He'd make these funny little noises. It was just
We're looking
great.
at some footage of Luna playing now.
Yeah.
And it was really like he just was playing with the people and hanging out. But how did you meet Luna, and how did you get involved in his life?
Well, I have written for Smithsonian Magazine and National Geographic for many years, and so I was talking to Smithsonian, and they said, "What's going on in your part of the world?" And I said, "Well, this is sort of unusual thing, this whale. I didn't know, I hadn't been there." And they said, "Why don't you go cover that?" And so we did. We thought, well, we'll go up there and we'll work like normal magazine writers and be there for a few weeks.
Yeah, we'll document everything and see how it goes.
and then we'll go home. And we never went home.
Well, this turned into such a story because you know, if there's one thing that we are good at as a race, human beings, is everybody gets their fingers in the pie. And this involved the Department of Fisheries, this involved the local citizens of Nootka Sound, this involved conservation efforts, this involved, I mean, everybody sort of came to the table with different ideas of how to solve the problem of Luna.
Right, and Luna had his own ideas as well.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that in some ways, maybe we didn't pay enough attention to, you know, and because that's where, when we got to know Luna, and we did later on later when we're up there, the sense that he was acting independently. Even the relationships we have with our own animals are different from the experience that we had with Luna. It was like it was equal to equal in this really odd way, because he was making the choice to make contact with us, whereas our pets are kind of stuck with us, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Our horses
you're dependent on food,
but
for shelter.
Luna is the wildest of the wild creature who just kept on coming back and back.
Ocean.
And some people, you know, we're on the West Coast here. Some people have only seen orcas in aquariums and such. But what was it like to look in the eyes of Luna when you got to know him? Because he was a friend, not a pet. It's the wrong word, but he was.
It changed everything for you.
You know what it's like? We look into each other's eyes. We start to talk about that. We don't know what to understand about what it actually means. Think about looking in a whale's eye and feeling that same sort of connection that you can't explain, but it's enormously powerful.
And wanting to understand Luna's language is a big part of it, whether he's splashing in the ocean or making the whale sounds. I mean,
and he made all sorts of sounds that sounded like he was trying to figure out our language. There's a thing in the film where he makes these little short kind of squawks, and I think he's thinking, these people talk in these little short bursts of things.
I'm going to do that too.
Yeah, you know. And at one point, you know, he sounded like tried to sound like the motor of the boat. I mean, he did all of these funny
How
noises.
much did this change your, I mean, because it's fascinating to watch because you really get a sense of Luna as a sentient being and all those things and complications that come with being a sentient being. I mean, sometimes really obedient, sometimes really communicative, sometimes a real troublemaker, all this stuff. But how much did this change your perspective on the way that we relate to this idea of how everything is linked together?
I felt, after getting to know him, that he was just as aware and self-conscious of living as I was. And for some reason, that seemed like, I don't know about a breakthrough, but it was very different.
It hits you in your soul.
It really does. It was really an amazing kind of a change for me, to think that I find life intense and precious, and to think that he found it the same and as complex as I do was really weird. And I don't, you can't sort of run it down to any one thing. Yeah. But that's how it came across. And I look at all animals differently now.
And watching the movie, it just, it makes you shake your head. People can be so stupid sometimes.
Yeah, that's
but
amazing.
Hopefully, I mean, everybody knows the story of how Luna ended. And it's so sad. I cried so much in the movie because getting to know him, I felt like I did too. But hopefully people will learn from your film and learn from Luna. What do you hope the humans learn?
Well, we feel like this film is really like an Irish wake. You laugh and you cry and then you're really glad.
A life well lived.
You're glad that you met this character. And it's really a story. And what we find is that people get different things out of it. And we're glad for that. A narrative story has all sorts of layers of meaning in it. And if we tell you a story, there's layers of meaning that you might get out of it that we didn't even understand. But at least we've told you the story. And that's what we're trying to do. It's not one of these sort of advocacy films where we're trying to tell you what should happen.
No, it's the story
None
of
of us
Luna.
know. None of us know. It's the story of a great character. So what people get out of it really has a lot to do with what they take into it.
That's really interesting. So I was going to ask you how gratified you were to be able to capture that complexity of Luna as a being and be able to portray it. But obviously that's what I got out of the film, right? I mean, I really took that away, and that was fascinating for me that you had that moment where, like you say, you can love your pets, you can adore them, but you don't always think of them as having their own lives. They're always connected sort of with you and what you're doing.
Yeah, well, what you're getting, I think, is really a lot of what we are trying to transmit, what you were describing. And so I'm very glad of that. I mean, you do have to sort of focus the film. You can't just sort of let it just drift. And that is really important to us, is that sense of this being and this life and the complexity of it that we don't understand.
And haven't tried to understand.
Audiences sit there after the film, when we're there to answer questions, as we will be, in this coming weekend. They sit there and they'll talk to us for hours because none of us have any answers. We don't have answers. They don't have answers. And so we're talking about, what does this mean?
Yeah, it's
and we still have to learn what this means.
But it's the legacy of Luna that people are talking about it, which I think is so important
Great
too.
job, Michael.
And the Whale is opening in Vancouver and Victoria on Friday, November 18th, as well as in Toronto and Ottawa, basically right across the country. You can go to the website to find out more information.
And partial ticket proceeds from the first night of the film go to the World Wildlife Fund, which is great. And you said you're going to be at the screening, one of the first screenings in Vancouver?
Yes, Vancouver and in Victoria.
Nice.
Excellent.
Answering some questions.
So we're going to divide up, Suzanne and I. Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Oh, I see.
If you have you both together, it'll go on for days. The conversation, I'm sure.
Right.
Thanks,
Thank
Michael.
you so
Appreciate
much.
it.